A small suitcase slipped out of an open overhead compartment as I passed by. It would have whacked me in the head if the flight attendant packing inside another luggage had not caught it. Her rosy lips yielded a wave of apologies, and I couldn't help but feel no anger in the face of such beauty. Unfortunately, she was most likely married, as the diamond ring on her ring finger indicated. I gave her a small smile and mumbled, "It's all right." I went further down the aisle and found my seat. My heart jumped to my throat when I saw I was to sit right by the window, but I didn't want to make a scene asking to change seats. I had tried that in the past, and it had always merely become a headache. Either my assigned seatmates took offense, there were no other seats left, or the flight attendant simply told me to stop complaining and sit. Besides, my co-passenger looked really hot. She was a fairly young woman with big honkers, curly brown hair, and a radiant smile which I had the honor to be given. I reciprocated it, looked at the boobs once more, and sat down next to her. I wanted to spark a conversation, see where she was headed, and if a date was a possibility. But my phone buzzed. I pulled it out and saw a photo of Savannah and Mitch holding a trophy. Underneath was a text, "We won. Dad, we won." A surge of joy flooded me as I beamed at the picture of my children. Only 13 and already so brilliant. I had told them I was sorry I wouldn't be able to accompany them to the science competition so many times they had to tell me to shut up. They understood. They weren't mad. They knew my job was what paid their pride at school and allowed them to compete in the first place. As a business consultant, I have always had to travel around the States, but that never diminished my lamenting the time not spent with my children. The nanny could only do so much. I was their parent, and they were my everything. At last, I was just a flight away from Philadelphia, soon to be with them again. I was contemplating which restaurants I should take them to for celebration, whether they'd be in the mood for a Philly cheesesteak or a nice banana split topped with whipped cream and cherries, when I heard a woman in the rear section of the plane scream, "Stop the fucking plane. Stop the plane." I frowned. I turned around, put my right hand on the headrest, and lifted myself up so I could see the seats behind me. A lady with a neatly tied blue and bun, Uchi-looking sports clothes was standing up in the seat space, arguing with a flight attendant who was unsuccessfully trying to calm her down. I caught phrases like, "See what happens," and "Please don't let this plane take off," delivered in a fearful voice. The lady then said she was getting off and stepped into the aisle. Another flight attendant blocked her path, and another argument ensued. I lowered myself back down onto my seat, but continued to listen and steal glances of the scene behind me. I didn't know how to react. The woman's tone brewed terror, but she seemed crazy, and I had seen too many crazy people in my life to take her even remotely seriously. I started to regret choosing economy over business or first class. After some heated, colorful words, the flight attendant stepped aside, making way for the lady, who screamed, "I am getting the fuck out," with tears in her voice. She stopped and turned around to say, "Because there is a stupid fucking dude," pointing her finger to the distance. Then she turned forward and strolled down the aisle, saying, "I'm telling you, I'm getting the fuck off. And there's a reason I'm getting the fuck off." She stopped to turn around again only a few meters ahead of where I sat. She raised her hand, pointed to the back of the plane, proclaiming, "And everyone can either believe it or they cannot believe it. I don't give two fucks. But I am telling you right now, that motherfucker back there is not real." Almost everyone sitting in the lady's vicinity turned heads toward the back of the plane, me included. I did not know who she was pointing at, and it seemed neither did the other passengers. She was probably hallucinating or something. "And you can sit on this plane, and you and I with them or not. I am not going to." She lowered her hand, turned around, and proceeded toward the front of the plane where the business class and the entry door were, leaving my view. One man hollered a phlegmatic bye at her. All passengers resumed their previous activities, and no one else tried to leave the plane. They all seemed to have reached a silent consensus that the woman was just crazy. The sexy lady next to me was the only one to voice it. "Jesus, that woman is nuts." She turned her head towards me. She looked totally faded. I nodded and said, "Yeah, too much meth. Probably." I had seen many of the horizontal people in Philadelphia do similar shows. The woman chuckled. "I'm Briony. By the way," she said. "That's a nice name." I lied. Briony was no better than Peggy or Zuma, but her tits were still perky and delicious, so I disregarded her name. "I'm Lance," I said. Not that Lance was any better of a name. Nice to meet you, Lance. Briony shook my hand. Her fingers were slender and manicured, with a cool feel. I hope she didn't notice the sweat on my palms. Is Philadelphia your last stop? She asked. Yes. Going back to my family, I said. A business trip. Then? Asked Briony. You guessed it. I grinned. How about you? Oh, I'm just on a fun adventure, said Briony, and her eyes twinkled with mischief. I love zesty women. Gonna stop in Philadelphia for a while and explore the city and all its delicacies. I'm originally from Missouri. I had to get away from that misery eventually. I snorted and nodded. I know what you mean. But you now. Since we have a common destination, would you like to go somewhere together? I know a great restaurant in downtown Philly. My voice sounded confidence, but I certainly didn't feel confidence. Not with my guts at the back of my throat. But, don't you have a wife? Briony asked. They said you were going back to your family. I hoped she wouldn't ask this, but this kind of conversion would have bubbled up sooner or later anyway. Yeah. Well, I'm going home to my wins. They're 13. Amazing kids. I don't have a wife anymore. She died 11 years ago. Briony's smile froze. Oh. Well, shit. She chewed on her lip. I'm really sorry about that. Are you sure you want to go out with me? I shook my head. No. No, it's all right. It was a long time ago. It really is how they say time makes everything better. Don't worry. I'm fine. That wasn't entirely true. I might have been able to look at the photo of my wife without tears pricking at my eyes, but I still felt uneasy on a plane. Okay. I regularly shat my pants on a plane. I worried I would die in a crash. Just like she did in Woodland shit their pants in my situation. So, would you like to go out with me when we land? I asked again. Briony smiled. Yes, that would be great. And now there was close to returning the smile. But then I felt saliva pool in them, and my stomach lurched up again. This time, I knew I couldn't keep it down. A familiar cold sweat started building up at the back of my neck, and I drew in a sharp breath as I stood up. Excuse me. I'll be right back. I mumbled towards Briony, whose eyes widened. Shit. Are you all right? She asked as I passed around her into the aisle. We'll be taking off soon. I gagged at those words, but forced myself to smile at her and say in a semi-calm tone, I'm just going to the bathroom. I'll be quick. I took in deep breaths through my nose. Grateful that none of the passengers paid me attention as I passed by their seats. They all had their heads buried in phones or tablets. A sturdy flight attendant before me closed one of the overhead compartments, turned towards me, and put her hands on the headrests of the seats on her sides, blocking my path. She had full lips and a lounge behind that I would have appreciated had I not felt like total shit. Excuse me, sir. I have to sit down, she said. We'll be taking off soon. My breath hitched as a tremor passed through me. I felt so bad I started shivering, and the air conditioning wasn't helping. The sturdy lady raised her eyebrows and sighed. If you also saw something weird, I can assure you, sir, there is nothing to worry about. The plane is safe, and we are about to take off. The lady was probably just confused by something. I shut my eyes and shook my head. Oh, no, it's not that. Just, please. I need to go to the bathroom. But sir, we'll be taking off soon. The lady said, you have to be in your seat. Only now that I looked her straight in the eyes did I notice her pupils were extremely enlarged, as if she were under the influence of ZAZA, or something even creepier. The screaming woman's words came to my mind again, but whatever paranoia wanted to haunt my ass was subdued by a retch. I covered my mouth with my fist, and the lady's face indicated that she started to understand my situation. Please, I'll be quick, I said. I just urgently need it. This can't wait. Please. I so hated these stupid plane rules. I knew they were there to keep me safe, but they also held me away from the toilet when I needed it, and something always came out either of my ends when I flew. Oh, Jesus. Lord. All right. The lady sounded startled. She was probably afraid I was going to throw up on her, which I would if she didn't fuck out of my way soon. Fortunately, she did, although the space was so small I had to grind my way past her. We both certainly looked like idiots to the onlooking passengers. I just hoped Briony wasn't looking. I stumbled to the pitifully small toilet cabin and struggled with the strange handle for a while. As soon as I managed to open it, I jumped in, slammed it behind me. It opened again. I slammed it closed again. It opened. I cursed and then saw there was a special lock. So I utilized that to keep the door closed. Then I felt the plane move. We were backing away from the gate, heading for the runway. That did DIT for me. I gagged and leaned over the toilet. I vomited up my meager breakfast and panted and strained over the bowl for some while. I hated barfing on a plane. The space was a claustrophobic prison, and there were no windows to let in real fresh air, not from that stupid AC, and the feeling always awoke thoughts of my dead wife. I culled out a couple of napkins and wiped the sweat from my brow and the vomit from my mouth. I coughed a few more times to get rid of the slimy feeling in my throat. Then I realized there were hundreds of passengers around me on this flight, and the walls of this little rectal hole weren't exactly noise-proof. I prayed none of them could hear me. After washing my hands and face, I learned with dread that the paper napkins had run out. I was suspicious about the toilet paper's cleanliness, so I resolved to leave my hands and mouth wet. The AC above my seat was strong enough to tear a man's skin off upon impact. After all, so it would surely dry me in no time. I walked out of the toilet cabin and tried my utmost to appear calm and collected, as if I definitely hadn't puked up my guts in there. Still, there was this nagging paranoia that everyone knew exactly what I did in the bathroom. That paranoia became reality when a young man with a wide smile sitting in an aisle seat looked up at me. "Here, sir, take this," he said in an amicable, polite tone, offering me a small packet. "It relieves nausea and an upset stomach, especially for motion sickness. There are 2 last tablets in there. Best to take for maximum effect." I gave the man a weird eye. Why the hell was he offering me tablets? Was that Dramamine? I focused my vision and saw that yes, it was. How did this man know I had run out of Dramamine? No. The fuck was I thinking? This man didn't know I had run out of Dramamine. He was likely just being polite, wanting to help. There were still altruistic folks out there. After all, why did that damn screaming woman have to board a plane with my pussy ass? Thanks, I said, accepting the Dramamine packet. I appreciated the man's help, but the dude was still smiling. Didn't his cheeks hurt already? Maybe only his real ones did. Be that as it may, it looked robotic instead of natural. Like that smile was the default state of his lips. But this was no robot, I was just paranoid again. The teeth of the lady passenger sitting to my left also looked a bit sharp. But then I saw they were just rotten. Crystal meth enthusiasts were called vampires for a reason. Damn that crazy woman for putting these stressful thoughts in my head. "I'm Michael, by the way," the young man said. "It was nice to meet you, sir. I hope you feel better." I accepted his hand, feeling like I was in a business meeting again. "My name's Lance. Nice to meet you too." But we were in a business meeting. I stood in the middle of an aisle in a cramped airplane, and someone's front soon pressed up against my ass. "Sir, the plane is already on the runway. We'll take off in a minute," said a female voice I recognized as that of the big but flight attendant. "You have to be seated with your belt fastened." I looked behind my shoulder, met those creepy large pupils, and said, "Yes, ma'am. Sorry. I'm going to my seat. Have a good flight." "Sir," said Michael. "Yeah, thanks," I said and strode down the aisle to the very front. I saw Briony's smiling head peeking out from behind her seat. As I sat down next to her, she said, "WW. Michael gave you some medicine." "I see. You know the man?" I asked, buckling my seatbelts. Was she already taken and didn't tell me? "Yes," said Briony. "That's my brother. We're traveling together. We're sitting apart, because the bureaucrats of the airline monopoly don't care that you're family, and they often put you on opposite ends of a column." I chuckled. This girl was the right kind of crazy, just the way I liked. I wondered what monopoly she could unleash in the bed. "You seem really nervous, though," Briony said. "You sure you're okay?" "Yeah, I just don't really like flying," I said. It was an understatement. Though, Briony shrugged. "I get that many folks don't like it, but I don't get why." "So, you mean you don't get it?" I said. "Yes," said Briony, "because for me, all I feel when I'm flying is thrill. Seriously, there is nothing better than that. All the clouds and landscapes underneath. It's really pretty, but I especially like what's going on inside the plane. It never gets boring here. Each trip, New people. I smirked and said, well, Philadelphia never gets boring either. I'm sure we'll have lots of fun there together. Briony smirked back. Oh, I'm sure we will. Big boy. I chuckled in surprise. Not at all prepared to be called that. I saw the reasoning. I was the healthiest body type clean but THICC. I started imagining Briony's curious hands exploring my torso downwards when the moving plane shook and tilted backwards. We took off. My hands reached to my seatbelt, making sure it was buckled. It was. I then gripped the handle of my seat. The plane tilted further backwards and sped up. I glanced out the window despite myself and felt bile rush up my throat. We were in the air, several feet above the ground, and we were moving high up, higher and higher. I shut my eyes, hell-bent on not puking in front of my potential date. Are you okay? Briony put her hand on mine. A different kind of shiver rushed through me. I sucked in a breath and faked a smile. Yeah, I'm all right. I then decided to use humor to conquer my fear, which usually helps. Let's hope the plane doesn't crash and we don't die, I said jovially, looking outside the window again at the shrinking trees, the airport, houses, roads, and the first clouds. I felt the bile again and had to close my eyes. Shit. This wasn't helping. Oh, we certainly won't die, Briony said. I froze. What the hell did she mean? I turned to her with scrunched up brows. Her sultry red lips were now twisted in a wide smile. But you certainly will. I wanted to ask her what the fuck she was talking about, but she was already leaning out of her seat into the aisle. She turned her head towards the rear end and shouted, Michael. Noun. I looked to the back end and saw Michael turn into a pale, long-limbed creature. He jumped on top of the seat in front of him and bit into the head of a passenger. The people around screamed in terror as Michael leapt onto the aisle and slit the throat of another passenger. My heart drummed in my ears. I averted my gaze to Briony. Her face was no longer the one I fell in love with, but that of a ghoulish creature with no nose, glowing yellow eyes, gray skin, and a myriad of sharp teeth. I had no time to react before she sank her teeth into the flesh of my neck. The thought of my children the last thing on my mind. I woke up in a hospital. A machine was breathing for me, and both my legs were encased in casts. The doctor came in shortly and told me that the plane crashed into the lake near the airport, making it a smooth landing. A lady, who chose to stay anonymous, pressed on my wound and called the ambulance. I wanted to ask about the creatures, but before I opened my mouth, I decided not to be so blunt. I asked in a vaguer way, what caused the crash? Were there some terrorists or something? The doctor snorted. No, not from what we were told. The lady who saved you refused to speak about what happened, but there were 2 other survivors. Another snort, as if you were telling a funny family story. They said there were some monsters on board. Ghouls. They said. What they didn't say was that they were drunk off their asses. But it was obvious. I'm genuinely surprised the alcohol didn't kill them before the crash. I was stunned by the doctor's boldness. But he had a point. And of course, no one would believe drunks. And no one would believe me either, so I didn't comment on the monster part. So, no one else survived? I asked. No, the doctor said. And his face took on a more serious tone. I'm sorry. Sir, was anyone traveling with you? I thought back to Briony and how her face went from a beautiful canvas to that monstrosity. I shuddered and resolved to stop thinking about that moment. I closed my eyes, pursing my lips. No, I said. I just met someone on the way. But it's fine. Condolences to the families. Of course. I was bumbling at this point. Condolences, for sure. The doctor said. Those caskets sure will have to stay closed. I probably shouldn't be telling you this. Sensitive matter and all. You know. But he lowered his face and grimaced. Almost every passenger had at least one body part missing. Torn apart. Many of them. He gestured weirdly around himself. I felt the familiar sting of bile in my throat. Well, maybe it was that dog on board, I said. Didn't the dog attack the passengers? The doctor frowned. Sir, there was no dog on board. You had no account of any animal traveling on your flight. I licked my lips, feeling dizzy. Sure, maybe I just mistook someone for a dog. I don't know. I ran my palm over my face. Sorry, I'm talking nonsense. Could you get me some more water? Yes, I will send the nurse, said the doctor. I will come back in an hour to check on you again. Sir, it was just me again. Me and the goddamn beeping monitor. I was sure what I saw was real, but my certainty wouldn't convince anyone else. No proof was left, except for two drunks with wild claims. If those two, creatures or whatever, had this all planned, then well done. They had their feast, or game, or whatever they wanted to accomplish, and no one would ever know what they are. Or maybe I could write about this and post it on some internet platform. Surely there would be some person, at least one person, who would take me seriously. I was overcome with the desire to speak out, to let the world know about what happened. Well, world. I meant people on the internet. It could be worth a shot. I typed up my story and posted it on a few sites I deemed suitable. I am now seated behind my desk, leaned back against my armchair, hands folded over my head. The knowledge of my children sleeping soundly a floor above me is warm and soothing. My hospital stay had worried them, but it was quickly washed down with some Philly cheesesteak and banana split. My mind sometimes wanders to the moment when I thought I would never see them again, and if I ever thought listening to Bill Cosby talk was uncomfortable, I can now say I would rather listen to him speak for hours on end than think about that again. I almost thought of it again. I'm going to need some more Jack. I might not understand what I saw, but I know I saw something unusual. I need answers, but I'm not going to make them up just for the sake of having them. One thing I learned that day is that if there's ever a crazy, screaming woman on my flight ever again, I will be the first one to listen and fuck off the flight before she does.